The Pacific region worried about a more assertive China. France, Germany and Spain are already working together on their own separate design, as is the US. For the UK government, this agreement is not just about security, but also economics. The hope is that developing a new fighter jet could sustain and create thousands of UK jobs and open doors to more arms exports.
Jonathan Beale is with our editorial partner, the BBC. Our digital producer is Redmond Carolipio. Our engineers are Jessen Dueller and Nick Esposito. I am David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan and the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Holiday shopping at thrift stores and yard sales can save money, but some second-hand items for kids may have been recalled for defects. WayneHogan.law. Links to defective product recall websites.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, a look at the week's top stories with our Friday Roundtable. As a Florida lawmaker behind the state's controversial parental rights and education bill gets indicted, someone shot bullets at Mayor Lenny Curry's office, and Duval students get new sex ed curriculum. Those stories all ahead. Then later, local executive pastry chef Rebecca Reed takes a bow on national TV. We'll go inside her new show, the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge, airing on Prime Video. That and more, all ahead. After the day's news.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. For the second time in recent months, a statewide ethics committee found probable cause to investigate a South Florida sheriff. Gerard Albert III reports on the case against Broward County Sheriff Gregory Toney.
The possible ethics case into Sheriff Toney largely stems from a murder charge when he was a teenager and his omission of it during his appointment process. Toney and his lawyers have said the fatal shooting, which occurred in Philadelphia in 1993, was in self-defense. Last week, his lawyer argued the record of the shooting was expunged, so there was no omission when Toney applied for the job. Toney has two options. He can choose to do a full evidentiary hearing before a judge, or he could enter into a stipulated agreement with the Ethics Commission. The end result could potentially be a recommendation by the commission that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspend him. I'm Gerard Albert III in Fort Lauderdale.
Clifton Cemetery in Jacksonville has been listed in the National Park Service's National Register of Historic Places. The Florida Secretary of State Cord Byrd announced that today. The Clifton Cemetery, also known as the Sammy's Plantation Cemetery, is significant for its association with the free Black community of Arlington, east of downtown, an area created during Florida's antebellum period, and for the extended Kingsley family who resided in the area. With an earliest known burial date back to 1841, Clifton Cemetery is the oldest recorded cemetery in Arlington. The temperature in Jacksonville is 65 degrees right now. It's partly cloudy, mostly sunshine for our afternoon. Upper 70s today, some fog overnight with a low of 61. Tomorrow's afternoon high in the low 70s.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
lawmaker behind a controversial Florida law is under indictment. Someone shot bullets at Mayor Curry's City Hall office. And Duval Schools passes new sex ed curriculum. Some of the stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We're live with you from Studio 2. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all the biggest stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable. Join us. It's 549-2937. Then later, a new challenge for local executive pastry chef Rebecca Reed as she takes a bow on national TV. It's all ahead, but first it's Friday, and here to round up the week's news, we welcome here in studio Nikisha Williams of Jax Today. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ann Schindler of First Coast News. Hey, Ann.
Hey, Melissa.
Raymond Troncoso of WJCT News.
Hey, nice to be here.
And Mike Mendenhall of the Jax Daily Record.
Good morning, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad all four of you are in studio, too. I'm so super excited about this, and it's 549-2937. You can listen live on the radio or watch our live video stream. We're up now. Let's begin with our top story. State Representative Joe Harding, the lawmaker who sponsored the Parental Rights and Education bill in the Florida legislature, the one critics have dubbed the Don't Say Gay law, he resigned Thursday, a day after authorities announced his indictment on charges of defrauding a federal coronavirus loan program for small business. The 53-year-old Harding sent his resignation letter to House Speaker Paul Renner. He's accused of trying to obtain more than $150,000 from the Small Business Administration in pandemic aid loans. Of course, Harding became a national figure earlier this year over his sponsorship of a law that forbids instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. Give us a call as we talk about this story. It's 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Let's start with you, Nikisha. You know, Joe Harding became nationally known over sponsoring the bill. It's my understanding he was told by the leadership in the state legislature, you're going to be the sponsor of this bill. Mm-hmm. That said, it is a controversial law. So there are two things going on. There's the law and his sponsorship of it, and then also the indictment on accusations that he misrepresented his businesses to get COVID relief money. Two things happening there.
Yeah, a lot has been said about the money that was given out in the height of the pandemic and how it may have been misused by states and local elected leaders across the country. So him being indicted for inflating employees and false bank statements, it doesn't surprise me because we know there was corruption that was going to go on. The government was just trying to keep the economy afloat, and people, as people are wont to do, are going to take advantage of that. And he got caught, and as we all know, the government doesn't bring a case against people that it can't win. So here we go. But as far as him sponsoring the Don't Say Gay bill and the wreckage that it has left across the state, especially in Duval County, with what's been happening with the support for the LGBTQ plus student community, I think is an effect that's going to be long lasting, and that he was handpicked to do something. Sounds like kingmaking to me. Like this is something that you're going to stake your career on and make an issue out of and not care about who you affect long after your, as he said in his resignation letter, your 2 years in office by divine providence will allow you to do. I think that we're going to see harm to children and students in the name of parental rights for much, much longer time to come than will be his even trial or sentencing or whatever is going to be the outcome of his fraud case and money laundering investigation.
549-2937. Ann Schindler, Harding faces potentially decades in prison for this. But as Nikisha pointed out, the law is in effect, and it has changed the way educators deal with these issues in Florida classrooms.
Yeah, I mean, the law has made things difficult for teachers in Florida classrooms, especially teachers who are themselves gay or in a relationship or married. I think that having people feel like they need to hide their personal life from their students. I mean, a lot of kindergarten teachers, are very much involved in sort of sharing and inviting kids into their life and having pictures of their family up it's a way that they relate to very young children is to kind of bring the life of like their home and their school together, and so it is tough.
Hmm.
But I think we do have to say that, I mean, he could face a lot of time if convicted. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty. But federal sentencing guidelines are far less than what the maximum would allow. So, I would cases like this are typically in the 5 to 7 year range as opposed to the 70-year range.
Hmm. And it sort of brings back to light what we were talking about earlier in the pandemic, Raymond. Businesses scrambling to get this PPE money, get the relief loans money, and some people allegedly trying to scam the government, misrepresenting whether they had an active business or not to just get a hold of these funds.
Yeah, so the loan that most people are going to be familiar with from the Small Business Administration are the PPP loans, which of course people didn't have to pay back, but a lot of people committed fraud to get those loans. In this case, this wasn't a PPP loan, and Harding says that he did pay the money back. It was about $150,000. The problem is, what the government's alleging is that he basically fudged employment numbers, bank statements in order to get that loan that he says he paid back. So he's pleaded not guilty. We're going to see what comes out in court. But like you said, the maximum sentence for a case like this is around 20 years. But in most cases, if you are convicted, you usually go to jail for far less time.
Yeah, yeah. Mike Mendenhall, in a little bit, we'll talk about what's going on with Duval County Public Schools and sex ed curriculum and how they dropped an organization that works with LGBTQ youth recently, dropped a consulting contract with them. This everything about this whole story is just incredibly sad.
Yeah, I mean, you've got you have teachers, as Ann pointed out, who are fearful to to even talk about their family in classrooms. And just the law itself was designed to be ambiguous. I mean, it's essentially you're supposed to not talk about same sex or LGBTQ issues for kindergarten through third graders. I mean, that's how the law is designed. But the way it's written is it keeps it ambiguous, so it really makes it difficult for teachers beyond that third grade level, even into high school, to really to be able to talk about these issues, which directly impact so many students across the state of Florida and across the country. When you're talking about former Representative Harding's alleged acts, I mean, this points to a bigger issue too, with the way that these types of pandemic relief loans were distributed. They were, I mean, the Small Business Administration has been criticized for a very lax kind of review process, and part of that was to get this money out the door quickly to make sure the businesses didn't actually fall, because I mean, a lot of small businesses in particular were just months, if not weeks, away from crashing. So I mean, in an effort, in that effort, people, individuals, politicians, and even some large corporations took advantage of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's 549-2937. Give us a call as we talk about the week's top stories. Okay, let's talk about some other really eye-popping news from this week. Let's begin with the fact that a bullet apparently was shot at Mayor Lenny Curry's office window at Jacksonville City Hall this week. JSO is investigating that. At the same time, a charter plane pulled a Confederate flag and banner criticizing Mayor Curry over downtown. It was a repetition of a similar stunt that happened before the November 27th Jacksonville Jaguars game. No comment from Mayor Curry on any of this. No evidence that the shot-out window and the banner are connected. 549-2937 to discuss this. Nikisha, as we were discussing this on the air the other day, a newly elected councilwoman, Tyrona Clark Murray, unprompted, called into this program and called out her colleagues on the Jacksonville City Council for their inaction on removing the remaining monuments and markers to the Confederacy in the city of Jacksonville, and said if it comes to a vote, she would vote to remove them. This banner, which was flown by an alleged white supremacist organization, was
criticizing the mayor for his position, it seems, on calling for the removal of these relics of white supremacy. And so that's sort of the backstory to all of this.
I think it is absolutely unconscionable that the Jacksonville City Council has, 2 years after Mayor Curry removed the Confederate statue from Hemming Park, still has yet to take any action on removing the rest of the monuments to the Confederacy in the city. The community conversation that was supposed to happen hasn't happened. And so it's really been, we'll let this issue die kind of vibe to it. And it hasn't died because it's still standing. And not only that, yeah, you renamed James Weldon Johnson Park, but the pedestal is still there that says in dedication to a Confederate soldier. So you have done nothing more than do lip service. And while I appreciate Mayor Lenny Curry for removing the statue from Hemming Park, I'm never going to forget that the day after it was announced that the Republican National Convention was supposed to come to Jacksonville. So I always look at that as something to appease the protesters, not something that was actually genuine. And so that doesn't mean that he isn't serious in his support of removing the other Confederate monuments in the city, but I just think it's politically expedient more so than actually trying to mend the race relations in this city and across the South that have led people to fly banners across football games and city council to criticize those who want to do better. And because of the dynamics of the city and how our districts have been shaped and who sits on the city council, it's been easy to forget or not acknowledge or just ignore the fact that this is something that people want action on in an effort to mend all of the different relations and issues in the city. And that's a deeper conversation that can extend to other areas. But at the moment, it's like, do something, take a vote. The money is there. Why not do it now?
Let us know your thoughts. It's 549-2937. Ann Schindler, I think the concern that's been expressed is that the longer this drags on and the more the protesters try to make their case, that at a certain point there could be the potential, as we've seen in other cities, for violence around this issue, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be really careful not to conflate, what happened in James Weldon Johnson Park to, the Confederate protests. I mean, it's really tragic and really terrifying if that was a bullet intended in some way specifically
for the mayor.
But there are other shootings that have happened in that park. There's other bullets that you can see in that park, lodged into various things. So it may well be, just a random shooting, which I think speaks more to the city's prevalence of guns and violence. But it really is, I think, a scary time. And the mayor, even tweeted the other day about, the stressful week that he's had and had extra security detail from JSO, obviously. And I thought, it was very good that the city council spoke strongly, even his opponents, about, this is unacceptable. He's our mayor and we need to, be united in speaking with one voice that that's not acceptable no matter what his positions are.
And to your point, Raymond, all of this happened against the backdrop of another child in Jacksonville being shot, Prince Holland. The gun violence in this city just continues unabated.
Yeah, I mean, we have a new sheriff at JSO, and that's obviously going to be the big priority, is trying to bring down the violence in Jacksonville that has really skyrocketed despite, having a real tough on crime approach that we've had in the city. Nationally, Republicans will point to cities run by Democrats and say, look at the murder rate, look how high the violence is. Here's Jacksonville, a Republican-led city that's pretty much had the same problem that all cities have had across America. Gun violence is really a national epidemic in America. You can't really point to any single policy that really contributes, but it's clear that there's a comprehensive approach that needs to be done to reduce violence, not just in our city, but in all cities. And it seems no one really has found what that method is yet. In terms of this particular incident, it's not the first time, as Ann said, that bullets have been shot at City Hall. It's the first time that I know of that a bullet has made its way through the mayor's window which is on the 4th floor. That's pretty crazy coincidence if it turns out it isn't related to the mayor at all, and it just was a random shooting that happened to go through his window. But regardless, it's very symbolic of the problems that the city faces.
I think that's absolutely right. Mike Mendenhall, you spend a lot of time at City Hall. What's the mood over there after this frightening incident?
Well, I mean, definitely some of the staffers that I've spoke with in the last few days on unrelated stories, I mean, it's a topic of conversation. They're shook up. I mean, whenever you have an incident of violence that takes place in your workplace, I mean, it's frightening. And, and as Raymond and Ann both pointed out, that there have been, shots fired near and around City Hall before. I've seen windows busted out of City Hall before, so there, I mean, that kind of stuff does occur over there. And I also wanted to mention too, with in regards to the Confederate, propaganda and the statues, it should be noted too that the city council has really kind of drug its feet on this issue. I think that they were supposed to convene a group from the University of Virginia to come down to examine removing these monuments, and those talks have stalled. The business community, in particular the Jacksonville Civic Council, they came out in support of that community conversation. But when you talk to business leaders around the community, they privately they will tell you that these issues they impact their ability to do business, their ability to recruit talent, especially when things like this make the national news. So I mean, there is a concern amongst the business community that these kind of things are a trend and they need to stop.
5492937, Belinda in Jacksonville. Hi, Belinda. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say, as a daughter of the South, every good Southern person knows that there are messages sent, and what that message, I think, we don't know, but I will assume that the message is sent that we will come for Black people, we will come for Jewish people, and we will come for any white person that stands in our way and tries to take away our rights or our heritage. I think that was a message sent not just to him, but for others to stay in line. That's always been the playbook in the South. For the people, for the masses who want change, have always been intimidated by the few who will intimidate them with potential violence and ostracization in their social situations if you don't stay in line. So the city council is actually doing the reverse. They're keeping this as a hotbed issue that's going to bring people, we're already a hotbed for white supremacy groups, according to what you said. And this is going to be something that's going to be a flashpoint over and over. And in the past, I had always been a Mayor Curry fan, but I have nothing against him. I pray that he stays safe and that vigilant, because that was a message to stay in line and be quiet. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you for that, Belinda. Nikisha, this banner had a Confederate flag on it. It was flown over the city by a charter plane. The banner read, "Curry, Stop Your Hate." It included the web address for a group called Save Southern Heritage, Inc., and they also claim responsibility for the banner flown over the football game, which read, "Put monuments back." And, this comes on the heels of the anti-Semitic banners that flew or that were raised during the Florida-Georgia weekend. So on and on, the hate messages go in this town.
The hate messages continue, but the responses to them are very different. Anti-Semitic messages in Jacksonville, nationwide, from popular public figures and rappers I will never name again, are condemned swiftly and without question. But it is anti-Black racism and anti-Black hate that is allowed to go unchecked. And so to tell Curry to stop his hate and to save the monuments and call it heritage, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating a group of states and people who fought to continue the enslavement of Black people who were brought here unwillingly and in chains to enrich a country that was stolen from the indigenous people who were here first. What are we saving? Why is that a monument or a heritage that should be celebrated? I'm not saying that we can't have a conversation about putting those monuments in a museum or a cemetery or a guided trail somewhere where we do a conversation in context of what they stand for, of why they were erected, of when they were erected, because it was not immediately after the Civil War was over. It was much later, after Reconstruction failed, that they were erected as a monument of intimidation, as the previous caller said, to remind formerly enslaved people and their descendants of where they came from, who they came from, and what might or could happen again if the Old South was to rise, right? That's something that needs to be put into context and to be explained, because that is a part of our history. But it's not something that needs to be celebrated or needs to be remembered as patriots. They're not patriots. They were treasonous. That's just what it is. And no matter whether you call it the Civil War or the War of Northern Aggression, it happened. And the reconciliation that was to happen after it was to bring the nation together. And while no one, even to this day, has figured out what to do about the Black problem in this country, we're here. And so that's a series of reconciliation that has to continue to happen, not just for Black people specifically, but for our country. Because as we've seen, even to this day, with the way that our political system is and exists and the divisiveness within it, a lot of it stems back to the racial reckonings that have not happened and the reconciliation that has not happened since 1865. So what are we celebrating?
Mike in Mandarin. Hi, Mike. Go ahead.
Hey there, Melissa. I was in Charlottesville during the Unite the Right campaign, and that occurred because the public officials up there couldn't take a handle of getting rid of the Robert E. Lee statue up there, and that sparked that whole mess and violence up there, and ended up with a young woman, Heather Heyer, being run over by a white supremacist. I don't want to see that happening here in Jacksonville. And what we're seeing here is more and more powder being added to the powder keg, because the Jacksonville City Council can't get their act together and get rid of the monuments. They need to come down. For folks interested, there's going to be a rally on December 13th in James Weldon Johnson Park. We need everybody to come out and express their displeasure and disgust with the fact that those monuments are still standing. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Mike. Ann Schindler, the other day on this program, as I mentioned, we had a city council woman call in, Miss Clark Murray. We also, unprompted, had a lawyer from the Office of General Counsel call this show, John Phillips, because we were talking about a federal lawsuit that's been filed by a guy named Earl Johnson Jr., saying that no taxpayer money should be used to maintain any of these sites. He's the son of Martin Luther King Jr.'s attorney, the late Earl Johnson Sr. So we're discussing this, and out of the blue, a city attorney, John Phillips, calls in and says, and he worked to make the case that the reason the city is in court arguing against Johnson's lawsuit is that the city's position is the courts aren't the appropriate venue to decide these matters. He then punted it over to the Jacksonville City Council several times, and you could hear the frustration in his voice, saying that he felt, and the Office of General Counsel feels, that this is a political problem that needs to have a political solution. In other words, reading between the lines of his remarks, what he was saying was, City Council, do your job.
Yeah.
Do something about this.
On the stick, right. I mean, I agree with John Phillips. I don't think it's something that's settled in the courts. It is not. It is a legislative matter that needs to be handled by the city council. And I think, they're obviously afraid of angering people who support these monuments, either openly or covertly. But I kind of look back to the HRO, which is kind of kept coming back, and they kept tamping it down. And there was all this opposition fomented, churches busing people to the city council so that they could speak out against homosexuality. I mean, it was a really, you felt like you were in a different century. But what I think that the city council needs to recognize is that this will go away when they, have the wherewithal and sort of the political courage to make the tough decision for them. And prioritize what the main of the city wants, which is to put Confederate history into a historical context instead of a laudatory context where it's being celebrated, and do it in a way that really makes sense. I mean, I know at one time they were proposing, well, maybe we can rededicate the statue to the women of the Southland, to all women, and it's like, that's not going to fly. I mean, come on. I just think that that's like, you fundamentally don't understand the objection to the statue if you think that, people of color are going to want to, claim that as a tribute. It's preposterous.
Yeah. When you understand the historical context under which these statues were put up, as Nikisha pointed out, that argument doesn't fly. Getting back to the gun issue, Bill emails the show, the Jacksonville journey made a huge impact on gun violence in Jacksonville. It was gutted during the Great Recession and only survives in piecemeal fashion today. We know what works, fund it. That was a series of prevention and intervention programs to try to reduce the plague of gun violence and homicides in Jacksonville, and it was defunded right when it was actually starting to make a real positive impact. So that was very unfortunate, and there are renewed calls to revive something like that. Let's go to Mike in St. Augustine. Go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the Native American piece being mentioned, who the land was initially stolen from, as a direct descendant of a Southern tribe. I really appreciate that that's added to the discussion. So. Yeah,
thanks for that. I appreciate that. Raymond, whether it's that or talking about the history of slavery in America, we just don't want to acknowledge painful truths. This nation was founded on genocide, land theft, and slavery. Those are the facts.
Yeah, I want to go back to something Nikisha brought up earlier about the message of anti-Semitism and how when that flew over various places in Jacksonville, it was rightly condemned immediately. I actually spoke to David Miller, a philanthropist, who, along with the Jewish Federation, committed $1 million to fighting anti-Semitism in Northeast Florida. And I talked to him yesterday in an interview regarding that message to Curry, that, keep the monuments up, basically. And he talked about the necessity of allyship and how you talked about the long, ugly history of this country for a brighter future where people need to come together to condemn these sorts of things. And he said, people came out and condemned anti-Semitism from all sorts of groups. And he says when there's anti-Black racism, when there's anti-Asian racism, other groups like the Jewish community, like the white community, need to be the first to come out and condemn it before the groups that have actually been targeted, to show allyship, and that it's for all of us to live here together in a successful society. We need to band together to say, hey, that's not what we're about. We're all going to come together as one community, regardless of our ethnicity or race.
Cliff in Jacksonville. Go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, I think that all the people that are involved in the flying of that rebel flag, they need to just get over that. The North won, and there's not going to be any more slavery. They need to go ahead and move forward instead of just keeping being behind in looking at their what happened in the past.
Cliff, I detect a northern accent there, so maybe New England or New York?
Yep, New England.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that, Cliff. Mike Mendenhall.
Yeah, I also think that when the conversation and debate on Confederate monuments, it's happening as we're in the midst of a mayoral election.
Yeah.
And in March, and you have several high profile people running for mayor, including the president and CEO Jack Chamber, 2 city council persons. So this could be an opportunity for them to actually to tackle this issue, to actually grab a hold of it and take the lead on it. But it'll be interesting to see if anybody running will actually do that, or if they'll just completely stay away from it. And you also have a city council that almost half of it could turn over. I mean, you've got a city council that I don't know, is it 9 or 10 city council people are up for reelection?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, for them, this could definitely be, they could either take the lead on it, or it could be a run out the clock situation.
But it is a good time for accountability, right? Because these people are having to go before the community. They're having to fundraise. They're having to ask for your vote and your support. And this is a really good time for people of Jacksonville who care about this issue to let those people know what they expect if they're elected.
Lisa calling from Tallahassee. Hi, Lisa.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. As somebody who is involved, boots on the ground with the removal of the Confederate statues in St. Augustine, I have experienced and witnessed the violence of this entity, this group of people that want to sustain and keep them. And as long as they are there, their power continues. You have to rip off the Band-Aid and take them down. It empowers them. They feel entitled. Once ours came down, the sense of the fact that they don't exist anymore has given a sense of, I hate to use the word peace, but it's changed the dynamics of the downtown plaza, because now everybody feels that they are welcome there. And I have to tell you that there's a friend of mine that's involved in the city down there that had to start carrying a gun because these people are violent and they're entitled and they don't want to lose their power. And you have to this is not an anomaly, what happened with the shooting of the mayor's office. And you can specifically connect it to the people that are trying to keep the monuments up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. To be clear, we don't know that for a fact, but I do appreciate everyone who's called in on this. We do have to move on as we talk about the biggest stories of the week with Nikisha Williams, Ann Schindler, Raymond Troncoso, Mike Mendenhall, and yours truly. Let's move on now and talk about another big story. Earlier this week, the Duval County School Board voted 5-2 to approve a new sex ed curriculum that will be compliant with state standards. In Florida, public schools are now required to get public input on sex education curriculum every year. Dozens of people spoke at this meeting for and against the curriculum. At the same time, groups also came out to support Jasmine. They were dropped from their contract working with LGBT kids in the Duval schools. And so when we talk about this, we want your calls at 549-2937. What are your thoughts about the sex ed vote in the Duval County Public Schools? Nikisha Williams, until they took this vote, there was no sex ed curriculum for a time in the Duval schools because of all of the controversies and issues that have been going on. So they had to put something in place.
Yeah. It's weird to me to think that we are teaching health classes without having a sex ed component for the age groups for which it is appropriate. And it's been nationally studied that when there is a sex education program, it does reduce the number of not only teenage pregnancies, but also STIs among the teenage demographic, right? So I would think as a parent, you would want your children to learn about sexual health and sexual education as a deterrent to pregnancy and birth at a young age and STIs, rather than let the children experiment on their own, because that's always going to happen, whether the class is taught or not. And, there being negative consequences to that. So I'm glad that it has passed. I still think that the Duval County School District is stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to appease the state laws and the parents, and then the two new conservative school board members who have come in and think that they have this mandate to usher in this era of conservatism and parental rights and homophobia and all these other things through what they support. And I think it's a detriment to children who are going to need to learn about the world, about their bodies, about sex, about sexual health in one way or another.
Chris tweets the show at the school board meeting. The three main issues were to finally have sex ed, to stop banning books, and to reinstate our decades-long relationship with Jasmine. This is 2022, but it seems like we're trying to be dragged back to 1952, he says.
I don't disagree. I mean, I remember when I first moved here, we were having basically the same debate in the early 90s, about sex ed and its appropriateness. I think it's important to point out that the curriculum that was objected to by Moms for Liberty and the other groups was a CDC and health department created curriculum. It's not exactly like, some sort of sexual libertines. It's basically a health-based, what you need to know. I also think it is just incredibly myopic of anybody who thinks that kids are not wildly exposed to sexual material on their phones, from their friends, through the internet. It is so prevalent. And not only should they be learning
Any
the basics,
parent knows this, unless
any parent, any teacher knows this.
Yeah.
And if you're not teaching them, they should be teaching them way more about how to view the stuff they're going to see and to not interpret that as necessarily normal, and to try to like teach them about the pornography that they are viewing. And the idea that you can't show them like a penis or teach them how to, how babies are made. And I mean, it really is foundationally irresponsible, I think.
On Facebook, Tom says the decision to end Jasmine's contract looks homophobic. This city's lack of inclusion will cost us when new business refuses to come here. Raymond, that gets back to what Mike was saying with regard to the Confederate banner, whether it's that issue or this issue. All of this controversy is painting a national picture of the city as frankly retrograde and backward on a lot of issues.
Yeah, on Jasmine, the city was kind of in a hard place optically. They're trying to toe the line, maybe unsuccessfully, that, hey, we still support Jasmine, just optically things were a little hot because of this uproar over a social media post, which is ultimately what they canceled those services for, which Jasmine has come out and said, hey, we're revising our social media policy, but this was a picture basically of cartoon penises, part of a card game, an adult card game that they posted that were part of games for young adults, college students. But their Instagram, of course, that they posted it on can be viewed by anyone. And so they said, that was our bad that we posted it, but that doesn't impact our services that we provide to the students at DCPS. So we're not really sure why you're going to cancel the contract over this. Of course, the superintendent, Deanna Green, says, this is about, safety and optics and things of that nature. So it doesn't look good for the city. I don't think it looks good for the school board, as you can tell from the uproar that was at the meeting from the members of the public who came to speak out. In regards to the actual curriculum, the city, again, put in a hard place where they have to include abstinence as part of the curriculum now because of this new state law that also requires that the sex ed curriculum be approved every single year. They're going to need to re-vote on the very same curriculum every single year. And they had 2 no votes from school board members, April Carney and Charlotte Joyce. So there's going to be a battle that now we're going to see annually. Every single year, they're going to have to rehash the same argument.
Yeah. And, Diana Green, as superintendent, can't be ignoring the fact that other superintendents around Florida are being fired by newly seated and more conservative school board members.
Yeah, and just in full disclosure, my wife actually works for one of the organizations that made a joint statement of support of the LGBTQ youth community in the wake of the Jasmine incident. But yeah, I mean, Diana Green, I mean, and any elected official in public school districts in Florida right now are under a tremendous amount of pressure and just a microscope from the statewide GOP, from the governor's office, to make sure that they are following these types of social laws that have been put into place. So I mean, Diana Green, since she's been head of DCPS, she's always been pretty savvy at, politically and maneuvering through tough issues. I mean, you think of it, the half-cent sales tax comes to mind. She was able to, eventually get the city council and the mayor's office on board after a lawsuit. So I mean, she understands how to read the room. Now, I mean, I think there's plenty. You could debate all day whether or not this was the right decision. I mean, or whether she should have taken a stand on this for Jasmine, or if there could be other issues behind the scenes that we don't know about. So, there's a lot there to unpack.
Let's talk about one other headline from the week. Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia defeated his Republican challenger Herschel Walker in a runoff to our north. This despite the fact that listeners in our listening area, mainly in Camden and Glenn counties, heavily supported Herschel Walker. This gives the Democrats, it did give the Democrats an outright majority in the U.S. Senate until Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema just announced she is now going to be an independent. But all of that said, Nikisha Williams, it's a Georgia story, but of course we were closely following it down here in Florida because we have some listeners up there in South Georgia who cast ballots in that election.
Oh, gosh. I don't All right. I'm going to be as diplomatic as I can because I never consider Herschel Walker a real candidate. I don't know why the Republican establishment in Georgia thought that he would be a formidable opponent against Raphael Warnock, but they did, and so they had an election. And I think that if there had not been a third-party candidate in the November election, we would not have had the runoff. The fact that Camden and Glenn County voters overwhelmingly supported Herschel Walker does not give me any confidence that Herschel Walker would have made a great senator. It gives me the idea that Herschel Walker would have been a yes man for the GOP party and for Mitch McConnell in the Senate to vote the way that they wanted him to with very little pushback. And that's not the kind of elected leader I would want if I lived in Georgia, but I don't. But Warnock won, and I don't want to talk about Herschel Walker anymore.
All right. Anybody else have a comment on this? And then we'll round up other news and notes from the week.
I mean, I would just say I think it is kind of cynical to put forth a candidate like Herschel Walker that, didn't have the qualifications to be that in that role. And I just think that, handpicking a celebrity to kind of run for the party.
And by the way, we're going to see more of this.
But I mean, it wasn't about a celebrity. It was about another black person. Like, the black man's winning for the Democrats. Let's get a black GOP
I mean,
person.
that's exactly why I'm saying it's a very cynical thing to do, to, put up a candidate that's not qualified.
When you could...
Yeah, I would just say for the Senate, there are two other independent senators besides Sinema, and they both caucus with the Democrats. We don't know what this means for the Senate. She could still caucus with Democrats, still give them a position of power when it comes to appointing judges and committee assignments. So we really need to wait and see on what this will actually mean practically for the Senate. But it is obviously a very interesting political move to register as an independent while you're currently a sitting Democratic senator.
Well, and also to getting back to the vote too, you look at the vote, and I mean it speaks to the continuous rural-urban divide that we're seeing in this country.
That's right.
As urban areas are becoming more Democratic, and you're seeing even the suburbs of Metro Atlanta also shifting to the Democrats
by 30 points.
Yeah, and that's
from maybe just 10 years ago.
Yeah, and that's a huge change. But I mean, but if you look at where Warnock won too, I mean he was able to outperform his numbers in the general election, and Walker did worse in some of those hard Republican voting counties. So I mean Warnock didn't even come close to winning them, but even the 1 or 2 percentage points that he had really helped elevate him.
Okay, before we say goodbye, let's go all around the horn and see what is making news this week that we might have missed. Yes, it's our lightning round, folks. Let's begin with Nikisha Williams.
Oh, goodness. I want to give a shout out to the students at the Jacksonville Art and Music School over on the east side off Liberty Street. Their art students in House Savage recently wrote a book, and they're doing an installation at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens that will be up soon. So I just really want to say hey to the kids because it's really awesome that they did this.
Excellent. Ann Schindler.
I'm actually looking ahead to next week when this special session starts. I've been very kind of obsessed with the whole insurance market collapse that is happening and all of the
most homeowners are.
I
know I am.
Yeah, I mean homeowners, but apparently too, just the way that it could impact everything in the state, from employment to the economy overall. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line for them to fix that or do something. Raymond Troncoso.
The city's animal shelter is desperately looking for fosters for medium and large-sized dogs for the next 2 weeks. There's a pneumovirus outbreak among their smaller dogs. About 130 dogs are in quarantine, so they really need people to take the large dogs while they're looking at that. So if you can, please check it out. They'll give you medical supplies and food and all of that for 2 or 3 weeks while they take care of their small dogs.
Aw, check that out, everyone. Mike Mendenhall.
Raymond, I'm going to add to that because you stole my thunder there, actually. So our actually senior rescue dog that we rescued 2 years ago turned 16 this week. We got her from the Jackson Humane Society, and this time of year is so important because whether it's Humane Society, the city, they all have a ton of dogs and cats and animals that need homes. So it's totally worth it.
Yes, it is. And make sure to join us today at noon on the Florida Roundup. We'll look at the state's triple-demic, the bad state of safety on Florida's roads, and shipwrecks uncovered after recent storms, including one in our area. That's today at noon on the Florida Roundup. And what's health got to do with it? Saturday at 4 o'clock. Listen for Dr. Joe Servin of Mayo Clinic then, too. And thank you, Nikisha Williams, Ann Schindler, Raymond Troncoso, and Mike Mendenhall, our penultimate media roundtable of 2022. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
In a moment, Jacksonville pastry chef Rebecca Reed of Black Sheep Restaurant Group is going to national television. We'll take a closer look inside the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge dropping on Prime Video on the 13th of December. That's coming up next, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Jacksonville Music Experience and the Florida Theater present Debbie Gibson's Winterlicious, an evening of holiday hits Saturday, December 17th at the JME Soundstage at WJCT Studios. Debbie will be performing holiday favorites along with some of her most memorable songs. Tickets and more information at jacksmusic.org/events.
This week on Science Friday, computer-generated images are all the rage. But how do they affect the human artists involved?
I think that they should have some say into whether or not they want their work incorporated into these data sets.
Where are the boundaries in AI art? Join us on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
Reverend Raphael Warnock scores.
I am Georgia.
And a defeated Herschel Walker says his team left nothing on the field.
And I'm not going to make any excuses now because we put up one heck of a fight.
Plus, basketball star Brittany Griner is released. And the House panel investigating January 6th says criminal referrals are coming. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Housley. Welcome to the City of Seuss. I would like to invite you, with the wave of my hand, to a new competition set in a magical land. We've gathered some bakers, the finest we know. Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge is the name of the show. 9 teams will create these characters so sweet. Will their dreams soar high? Or collapse in defeat?
Welcome back. Doesn't that sound like a fun show? Guess what? A local culinary star is part of it. Rebecca Reed, the executive pastry chef at Black Sheep Restaurant Group, is putting her culinary skills to the test on a brand new show. It's called the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge, and it premieres on Amazon Prime Video December 13th. Rebecca Reed has the sweet details right now here in studio. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited about the premiere of this show and getting the word out here in Jacksonville.
Me too. This is the first I've heard of it. When we heard that you were going to be on the show, it sounds really, really fun. So tell us what we'll get to see and see of you too in the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge.
Well, I actually got to go out to LA and shoot on the Sony lot. So it was a really incredible experience. The whole set was just magical. It was literally like stepping into a Dr. Seuss book. So I, walked on set and they actually gave me a partner that I had never met before, ever, really only via a few phone calls before we got in there. Her name is Ashley Ball, and she was phenomenal. So I got to work with this partner, and then we had to make these edible showpieces. And the whole idea was really creating something that was Dr. Seuss inspired, but edible and something that told a story through a dessert mosaic. So it's definitely a new type of baking challenge, and you're going to see some really interesting creations from our team.
Wow, like what? I mean, you were competing against other pastry chefs and self-taught bakers. So you're trying to make desserts out of Dr. Seuss imagery like the Cat in the Hat or the Lorax or green eggs and ham. Is that the challenge?
Absolutely. Yes. They, started each show with a shorter challenge first, and you had a brief amount of time to meet with your partner and try to come up with something. And we were judged on our storytelling ability and then also on the most delicious bite. So I was really focused on trying to put out the best food I possibly could. And my partner, with a little bit of a different background, she was really involved in all of the armatures and all of the structures within the cakes and creations that we made. So it's really kind of neat to see something new with all of these apparatuses within, and then also trying to relate things back to Dr. Seuss, which is not what I typically do, but it was also really fun.
Now, it's holiday time. Did you create something in homage to the Grinch?
I can't let
You
any
can't
real
say.
spoilers out there, but you have got to see the show because it was absolutely magical. And the ways that they decorated the set and made everything just come to life for us was incredible. I cannot wait to share this with people.
Oh my gosh. Now, you're the executive pastry chef at Black Sheep, and you also won another national show, Chopped Sweets. So you've already done this kind of thing before.
Yes, I had some experience going on Chopped, and winning Chopped Sweets was fantastic, and it definitely prepared me in a way for this. But that was like one 16-hour day going in New York City, going out to LA, being flown out there, working with a partner, shooting on the Sony lots where they shoot like Jeopardy and Shark Tank, and they shot parts of Spider-Man on the stage that we were on. It was just a huge production.
How stressful was it? Do they put you under time constraints to finish something and that whole kind of deal?
Absolutely. Yes, there was all of the time constraints, and having been on Chopped and also really just being a chef, I am used to having to perform under pressure and under time limit. So definitely had to draw from my, typical day in the life of a pastry chef, but this is just absolutely dialed up. It's like you crank it up, there's bright lights, there's people running, there's hot things. It's a lot.
It's a lot. What does the winner get? Just bragging rights or?
More than bragging rights.
More than bragging rights?
$50,000.
Whoa.
For the team. So there was also that chunk of money that everybody was trying to get their hands on.
So it's just you and me talking. Did you win or not?
I can't say.
You can't tell us.
But you know what I'm really excited about is to get to represent Jacksonville on this national stage, actually like international stage, which absolutely just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a global audience.
It is wild to think about that. I think we have so many awesome things happening in Jacksonville, and I think that our food scene is really just on the rise. So to get to represent us and to also, bring that spotlight to Jacksonville makes me so proud. So I hope, the community is really excited to watch along and, see everything that happens.
Now, this is premiering, as I said, the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge premieres on Prime Video December 13th in more than 240 countries and territories around the world. After the premiere, you'll be able to bake your own version of the creations that are depicted on the show, and the winning recipes will be available in Amazon's Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge store. So we can try to recreate these at home.
Yes, and that was one of the things that I didn't know going into the show that they would be doing. So when they tell us on set that they will be releasing our recipes and sharing them on that Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge store online for free for people to gather their ingredients and bake along with us, oh my gosh, it was like my jaw was literally on the floor. I hope that they used, my real reaction on there, because it was just so exciting and significant for me to feel like I get to share my recipes on this big, big stage, and that people get to kind of bake along with me, because I love to teach people how to bake, and I love to really break things down, because being a pastry chef and, all of this like fine
Yeah.
French technique can be very
Sure.
intimidating. So to get to share it in a practical, applicable way for the holidays.
So
is so awesome.
exciting. I can't wait to watch it. It's the Dr. Seuss Baking Challenge premiering next Tuesday night, December 13th on Amazon Prime Video with Black Sheep pastry chef rock star Rebecca Reed.
Thank you.
Oh, I hope you win. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Melissa Ross. We'll be back at noon for the Florida Roundup. Make it a great Friday.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Wayne Hogan and the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Holiday shopping helps share the joy of the season with family and friends, but because some toys are defective, WayneHogan.law links to toy recall websites to help parents avoid dangerous toys.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.